Next up, a subject that I'm sure is important to many of you, startups, brands alike, corporate innovation. I'd like to welcome back to the stage one of yesterday's best moderators, Prerna Suri, and her panel on corporate innovation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. It's week 2 here at InnoFest, and having Steve Leonard be the preceding panelist is no mean feat, so we'll try and be as thought-provoking as him. Great stuff, Steve. Love blockchain as well. Yesterday and today, we've had some very interesting discussions around big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, the future of work, the future of mobility. Today we've got a very nice elongated panel here on the stage, as you can see, and we'll be discussing Agile Giants Corporate Innovation. And as I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking to myself whether that title needed a question mark at the end, because the cynic in me would always argue that if you are a big bureaucracy or if you are a big company, innovation in itself is an oxymoron, because how do you innovate something as large as a bureaucracy? We all know that corporations are slow to move, startups are faster, more agile, and on that very positive note, I would also like to introduce my panelists who are going to enlighten us on how they're doing that. So I've got Zaman, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at MetLife, followed by Hammond, who's the Global Head of Unilever Foundry. Paolo Borromeo, who is the Group Head of Corporate Strategy and Development at Ayala, which is a Philippines-based conglomerate. Sanjeev Mehra, who's the MD and CIO and the Head of Technology of APAC EMEA at Citi. And last but certainly not the least, Geert Wouw, who is the Vice President of Shell Ventures. Phew. I think I just need to sort of take a pause before I can sort of then continue. But I think this powerhouse of a panel, I'd like to start with you perhaps, Johnny, because when I think of Unilever, I think of some great brands when I was growing up, shampoos and conditioners. How do you reinvent the wheel on something as memorable as that?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you still think of great brands, not just... so I look after the Unilever Foundry, which is Unilever's startup platform. So we engage with startups and we take business challenges and then take them to market. And I guess, essentially, Foundry was set up specifically to address that and to answer that question, because we know increasingly ideas can come from anywhere and not just within the four walls of Unilever. And so we need to make sure that we're constantly looking outside of the four walls of Unilever, understanding what technology is out there, what startups are creating, and partnering with them. And we believe that via the Unilever Foundry, we can actually lead to a win-win relationship. You mentioned that we have big global brands, lots of scale and equity, so we bring that to the table, and the startup brings the potential new business model, the access to a new consumer set or data set, or a new way of consuming, understanding consumers, or better engagement. So I think we really see a win-win relationship for both ourselves and for the startup, and what we bring counters what they bring. And a perfect example for me is Signal, which is one of our big oral care brands. We partnered with a startup out of France called Playbrush. Now what Playbrush does is for any of you who have young kids at home and try to get your kids to brush their teeth, you know it might be a bit of a struggle. But what Playbrush does is it's a small dongle that goes on the end of your child's toothbrush, and they have to brush all the corners of their mouth to play the game on the smartphone. Now, and they don't pass a level of the game until they've brushed all the corners of their mouth. Now, no one in Unilever was sitting around thinking, how can we build a dongle that goes on the end of the toothbrush to connect to a smartphone? But somebody out there was, and we found them. And Playbrush is a fantastic business, but doesn't have the same brand equity and reach that Signal does. So by partnering the two together, we're able to be innovative while still staying in touch with some of those great kind of startups that are coming onto the scene.
How do I get Playbrush here in Singapore? Because my son's turning 1 year and it's just a nightmare to sort of get him to do that, but we can discuss that. I think just talking about some of the things you touched upon, Johnny, Zaman, you're in the insurance business. That in itself is, how do I put it? It does have legacy behind it, but what are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to driving innovation in a sector like that?
Off stage, you said boring. That's okay.
I didn't see that.
And call me Zia. I agree with Johnny. You can never innovate faster than the market. So we actually stole a little bit from the Unilever Foundry model. And what we did was we created an opportunity to match scale-ups with problems that we have in the business. We find problems in our business with owners and with budgets, and we say to the outside world, hey, do you have a solution that might be interesting? It's not as interesting as perhaps dental care, but imagine some analytics that might be able to better identify what is a fraudulent claim and which is not a fraudulent claim. We found a company in France that does this, and they've integrated into our system so that fewer fraudulent claims means that we can pay less for insurance. And it all comes from the platform and the openness that we might not have the solution internally, but we might need to go externally in the market to go find it.
So, and this is open to anyone on the panel, when you do think about and look at these solutions outside of the organization you're in, when they come inside, are you killing innovation? Are you killing the startups that you're bringing in?
I mean,
This is for anyone.
Can you repeat the question?
So let's say what Zaman was talking about right now, Zia was talking about right now, which is, you look for outside solutions sometimes in the sector that you're working in, and therefore you have Unilever Foundry, you have Shell Ventures as well. You have all these incubator spaces which are coming out to identify the next big thing. As soon as you bring them in, are you actually killing that innovative drive, Geert?
The way we do it actually is we keep them at arm's length as much as possible. Even the acquisitions that we do, so typically Shell Ventures about doing minority investments, but sometimes we acquire a startup and we manage them at arm's length. We replace the board, and that's about as far as we'll go. And that will help certainly during the first couple of years to avoid that we strangulate the startup and their unique culture, which was the reason we bought them in the first place. And in venturing, what I do is I have a couple of people in my venture organization I call implementation managers, and they're kind of internal sales and connection brokers that enable the startups to navigate the Shell empire, which is 120,000 people over many locations, and that really helps those startups to get their business models and technologies applied in the field.
Yeah. So just to add to what he said, so absolutely what you just described is what our ventures arm would do in terms of if the engagement is of getting a startup or incubating a startup, of getting them going. But there is this another model which we've had great success with in the last 2 years, is using our own whole open banking platform, which is our developer portal. And what that does is that it gives you the best of kind of both the worlds, where you have startups as many. Even it takes away the burden of curating whom we should partner with, because it kind of becomes a very self-selecting process, where the startups, any number of startups can, at any moment of time, we have about 3,000 to 4,000 startups or companies on our portal building apps. But what comes out at the end of the pipe is the ones who have actually created business models around our APIs, have demonstrable business use case, whom we can then onboard, and it allows the perfect flexibility of them continuing to run their own businesses along with those transactions flowing through our ecosystem. So that is another way of looking at how to keep startups healthy as well as connected to yourself.
Yeah, I guess I'd build on the two comments as well. Is acquisitions are kept at arm's length, whether it's be Ben & Jerry's, Dermalogica, Mehra, Dollar Shave Club. They're all left to be independent because I wholeheartedly agree. You kill what you bought them for if you kind of swallow them up too much. And I think for us, for Foundry, we don't actually invest in startups. We're a partner, so it's a supplier-client relationship. So there isn't really much possibility for that to happen. They're not prohibited from working with anyone else. We work with startups that are, I guess, ready to scale and ready to work with a large organization like Unilever. So they've got a proven business model, they've got other clients, these sorts of things. And so therefore the chance of success for both parties is a lot higher. And we're not prohibiting them, we're actually helping them from being able to work with a large corporate. We have different procurement terms, different legals, different scope of works, all designed to make Unilever an easier or a safer place to experiment with new technologies.
Sure. So almost seeming like a win-win situation where you have that startup culture, that drive, that agility, yet you have the backing and the comfort zone, I guess, of a large corporation. Paolo, I'd like to sort of talk about the Philippines here, because clearly Ayala is, it's a conglomerate. It's big business in the Philippines, and we had that discussion before our panel here as well. How would you compete in a place like the Philippines, where the entries to barrier are quite low, and where startups are coming in by the dozen, by the dime a dozen, I would
Sure.
say?
Well, no, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel so humbled and honored to be with this distinguished group of gentlemen. I think we're a little different from...
And lady, please. So.
And lady. But I think we're a little different from everyone. All of these guys are industry heavyweights in their own right, in their own sectors, and it's really fascinating to be with you guys. We're a little different. We're probably older than Shell.
You're
Probably
dead
older
old,
than
huh?
MetLife. We're a 184-year-old
Wow.
conglomerate. So we've been through 7 or 8 generations of leadership. We started off as an agricultural trading company. But I think what's important to know is we've always prided ourselves in the concept of reinvention and maintaining relevance, especially to our home market, which is the Philippines. This is probably why we've lasted this long. And so over the last decade, over the last century, we've really evolved the portfolio into what it is today. And today it's, we are the leading real estate developer, the largest real estate developer in the Philippines. We started branching out into Malaysia and into Indonesia and some other Southeast Asian countries. We are the oldest bank, Bank of the Philippine Islands. We own, with Singtel, Globe Telecom. And then we are into utilities, Manila Water, Ayala AC Energy, AC Infrastructure. And then more recently, we got into healthcare and education. So it creates a unique platform for innovation, as I'm sure my colleagues can imagine, because you can start playing around, experimenting, piloting across different business units, whether it's big data, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's automation. There's fantastic, tremendous amounts of opportunities to innovate.
You also
And-
have the advantage of the market in itself, because I think if the winner takes all, especially in the Philippines case, as well as Southeast Asia. So how do you sort of make those linkages between data, between, let's say, a teleco and a bank?
That's right. Well, privacy issues aside.
Of course, GDPR, we're not talking about that today, but
No, but there's enormous opportunities. Right now, we do a couple of things. We have an in-house innovation unit, which my colleague Vince Tobias runs. The goal is to try to create synergy opportunities, special projects like Foundry does, where you get representatives from different organizations and share data around. And we're piloting a very exciting project around customer loyalty. So loyalty programs that connect our telco, our bank, and our real estate company, our automotive company, and sharing information amongst those. The second thing we've done, Prerna, is we created a ventures group, and we called it AC Ventures. And I think akin to what you're doing, Johnny, it's we allocated $200 million. We said, these are for seed funding for businesses that we feel we could bring in or invest in that could either disrupt, complement, supplement the industries or the businesses that we have. So a couple of different things that we're doing on the corporate innovation side to try to harness that marketplace.
so I think just looking at the experience of the panel itself, we've got people from banking, we've got people from oil and gas, from FMCG, from insurance, from family conglomerates, and this is a question to each of you on the panel. Can big companies innovate? Can they actually transform the legacies that they've been perhaps burdened with and transform that into a more agile corporation?
So I think we can. I think over history, 50% of the innovation growth actually comes from large companies. It doesn't get as much press as perhaps the startups do. But you don't have to look further than this room for examples of companies who've innovated across the portfolio. We've got data, we've got channels, we've got people, we've got assets and brands that we could leverage. Sometimes we lack agility, but when we do show some agility across the innovation portfolio, we can fix the existing business, we can do something completely new for the customer, or even reimagine our industry. So for example, as a large company, a very large company, 150-year-old company, we are in the EMEA sandbox with a blockchain experiment, just like a startup would be, looking for a way to include women in the insurance equation with something simple that leverages distributed ledger. And I think there are lots of examples of corporations that understand that it takes a portfolio and they're in a good place to actually create growth.
No, absolutely. So I have this view that most of the time, corporations cannot innovate is a cop-out, okay? So, and every time somebody says that to me, I typically respond in this manner. Yes, large corporations have constraints in terms of established systems, processes, etc. But there is enough room, and more than that, what Zia pointed out too, more than enough untapped resources which you can use and bring to bear. I run product development for 17 markets globally. 17 consumer markets globally. So, and if you go, and these, we cover 17, I say 17 consumer, it is credit card, wealth, banking, loans, insurance, branches, mobile, internet. If you are a Citi customer in any of these 17 countries, from UK to Australia, you touch our platforms. And each of these countries have different culture, different market practices, and each are evolving differently. So there is no way we can sit in an ivory tower in Singapore and decide what is the best for customer in every market. So that itself drives a constant need to be agile, innovative, and flexible. And one of the big things which have happened to us in the last 2 years with the arrival of fintechs and the tech companies is that there is no way we are going to outthink and outrun the innovators. So the only way to do that is to leverage on our strengths and step out and integrate and embrace them. And that was the whole idea about doing our whole open banking platform. And the way we did that, we put 90% of what a consumer bank does out as open APIs. So Prerna, you tomorrow actually can build a bank of your own if you want to.
I'd love to.
Okay.
I mean, if
So that's the power of, if you're a startup, you can build up. And we had interns who came over and developed our whole banking app in an internship using our APIs. So that tells you the power of, once you unleash something like that, okay, where it takes you is basically you ride the wave of all the innovation and disruption you're happening in the market. Just a month ago, actually this month, we had partners our partners are partnering with each other to build solutions around our APIs.
Yep.
So Line in Thailand partnered with another of our e-commerce partner, Busby, and created using our reward points. Our customers who are on the Line platform can use our reward points to buy stuff from Busby. And they built our solution around us.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to discuss about the so-called extinction of agile corporations, but we'll come to that later. I know, Geert, you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at Shell, which is a very old company, not as old as Ayala, but still, you know, we were there when the dinosaurs were still eating plants in our backyard. But the only way you can survive 120 years of history is if you continue to innovate, right? We were the first one to design the Suez Max tanker, to get into LNG, to commercialize gas to liquids. We were the first energy company applying the blockchain most recently to do trading. But we came to realize that, you know, we cannot do that through proprietary research and development anymore. We have to reach out to the startup community, and for the simple reason that we are being outspent and outsmarted. If you look at the amount of money we spend for proprietary research, about $1 billion a year, which sounds like a lot of money, but then if you look at the venture capital industry, which invests, say, roughly around 80 to 120 billion a year, and let's say 10% of that is relevant for energy, then you're talking about $10 billion of relevant spent in innovation, in energy, whether it's in digital, it's in clean tech, it's in oil and gas, robotization, the blockchain. That is relevant to Shell. So we're being outspent, and I think also we're being outsmarted, because a lot of young people, you know, they choose to start their own companies and unfortunately manage to escape us when we try and recruit them. So, so you really have to find ways to engage with that startup community and make sure that these technologies and business models that are relevant to us actually make their way into the field. And the best way to do it is actually offer these startups not just money, but also support in terms of revenue opportunities and generate, you know, specific connects with our businesses to ensure that they can actually thrive within Shell.
Sure.
And meanwhile, manage the relationship at arm's length.
Sure, I think just broadening the discussion as well. I've worked in several large bureaucracies without naming anyone, and I've also faced the challenges of being an entrepreneur, but in a large bureaucracy. So I guess the follow-up question, especially for those in the audience who are thinking, what is that secret sauce when you're thinking about transforming a company? Is it the people? Is it the work culture? Is it both? So what is that?
Can I start? You know, just on your previous question, it's always easy to point to the Blockbusters and the Kodaks of the world, you know, as examples of how corporate cannot innovate, right? But I think it's also very sexy to look at the Apples and the Facebooks to say that those are the next generation innovators. But you look at Unilever, you look at MetLife, you look at Citi, you look at Shell. These are tried and tested companies that have been there for decades and centuries even. And there's something about, I think, each organization that's present here that I think is getting to your question. I think there's a culture of real creativity and innovation and a leadership that champions that. I know in our group, leadership is really trying to set the path forward in terms of reinvention, innovating, and then we were talking earlier, Johnny, it really stems from the very top, right, in terms of unity. I'm sure you guys would agree. It stems from leadership and a strong culture of innovation and just, a willingness to experiment, even though it's sometimes very difficult when you have very demanding shareholders and very demanding investors, but it's the same thing for corporates.
I agree. Leadership plays a really important role. The tone from the top in terms of stimulating innovation, willing to take risk, looking forward is extremely important.
Yeah, I agree. So, Paul Polman's our global CEO, a big fan of the Foundry. Keith Weed is our sponsor, who's our CMO, and I think both of those two provide us a lot of scope and a lot of space and freedom to operate the Foundry. And I think on top of that, the Foundry, I think the makeup of our team, so everyone other than myself, comes from outside of Unilever. They come from a startup background, they come from a tech background, and they understand that world. And I think you really need to have those types of people in your business to help shift the mindset, because there is a mindset change that needs to happen. And I touched on before about kind of the ways of working need to change as well. So, we have, shorter payment terms, these sorts of things for our startups. So it's very streamlined scope of work or legal process that we go through as well. And I think, all of these things need to be checked off with making sure that we balance protecting Unilever as a large corporate, making sure that we are doing things in the right way, and that we're executing pilots that aren't going to put either party at risk.
It's culture and leadership.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
leadership's first goal is to set culture. And at Lumen Lab, we have a very distinct culture that's trying to infuse some of that back into the rest of the company. You can do it via M&A, you can do it with partnering, you can build an API network, but at the end of the day, having a customer-oriented culture where you have curiosity, bravery, willingness to experiment, these are the things that really create the foundation for the next 200 years.
Sure, then, yeah, Geert.
Maybe one thing to add, also, I think we need to realize that in the large corporates that we work in, you don't need everyone to be an entrepreneur. When you run a petrochemical site in Singapore, you don't want the site manager to be an entrepreneur. You want it to be a very good operational manager because he's managing a very complex chemical process. Entrepreneurship can be a little bit threatening, if you may say so. But you do want the people, other folks in the organization, to be very innovative in developing the businesses of the future, right? But there are certain parts of the organization that is about, small step change improvements and is not about radical innovation, and you need to respect that.
So absolutely. So there's no cookbook, okay, but there's a ton of stuff which we have learned, okay? And few of that is that there is not a perfect time to get started. So to use the cliche, you have to change the tires while the car is running. Okay, that's the constraint of a big org. There's no perfect time to get started. Second thing is which we have learned, a big lesson is that competition helps. So you should even it sounds redundant, you should have competitive and competing initiatives running in the organization. Incremental changes with profound impact. So that is the lens we use, that you have incremental changes with profound impact. Tie it up to your scorecard. At the end of the day, if it is not resulting in your bonus, okay, it is all empty.
Innovation is tied to your KPIs. I like that. I think just, picking on that point as well. So I come from a country like India where innovation is sort of in our bloodstream, and I'm sure a lot of people from other countries like that would reflect on this. We have a concept called jugaad, and Johnny and Paolo, we were talking about this offline as well, where true innovation actually happens when you don't have the resources, when you're hungry, when you have the desire to have a better life for your kids and your family, but all you have is that one copper plate that would be replicated as your bed, as your toilet seat perhaps, and perhaps even your motorbike seat as well. So for corporates such as yours, you guys have the resources, the money. How do you think true innovation in that jugaad sense would actually be achieved? Is that, again, an oxymoron?
So I'll talk about that, because one of the things which we have seen, we have got both the models running. We have got a pure innovation lab model running, which is for a pure, and the ventures model, which is funded, big bucks, acquire, fund large, far out, and when I say far out initiatives, these are unproven technologies at this moment of time, future in the sense. The ones where we have seen big success and takes turnaround is having innovation incubated within our business as usual, what we call the BAU processes. And there what we say is that you will not have incremental budgets to do innovation. You will take from the book of work your annual budgets. And so what you need to look at is what you need to deliver is given to you, but how you deliver is up to you. The how is up to you. And you carve out from that. And that kind of creates a level of constraint on resources that are available to you. Time is constrained, your dollars are constrained because you have to deliver and you have to innovate. And there is a competitor within the organization who's innovating on that lines. And you have, on top of that, you give full empowerment to the teams to take decisions in those sprints. So they are the ones who take decisions. And that is what drives this engine.
But to do real step change in our industries, we can't do it the same way we've done it in the past.
Yes.
You can't serve tomorrow's customers with yesterday's business model.
Correct.
And in Jugaad Innovation, it's about innovation that loves constraints.
Yeah.
So what we set out to do is for the next 2 billion people, really rethink the model.
Yes.
A step change lower in terms of the cost basis, leveraging different types, not just of technologies, but different types of channels for that kid in Malawi or the communities in Bangladesh. And what we say is we start with those customers who are underserved out there. And in the insurance world, we think that there's a gig economy, middle-class farmers, we think octogenarians, the elderly, people of faith, there are 1.8 billion Muslims, and then finally women are often underserved in many of these communities. How do we provide simpler product that's easier to purchase, that's more bite-sized, back to the sachet model that you guys have used, in order to make not just financial services, but everything about their life, health, a little bit more accessible. It's a principle of inclusion in order to reach the next 2 billion people, but with the step change constraints that we're talking about in order to really get the teams to think differently.
No, I love that, Zia, because I was going to put forward, Prerna, that to us, innovation, the most powerful type of innovation is what we call inclusive innovation. And it's where you look at technology, you look at trends, but at the same time you look at structural gaps, societal gaps where there are clear problems to be solved, and you try to put 2 and 2 together to really try to come up with step-changing innovation, as Zia said. I think that's the most meaningful type of innovation. So for us in the Philippines, I'm sure you gentlemen know that financial inclusion is a long way from where it needs to be, where 20% of the population, only 20% of the population is banked. So how do you develop new products and new services, whether it's micro-insurance, micro-lending, that can cater to a vast majority of people? I think when you start hitting those types of questions and trying to solve those types of problems, that's where the real impact of innovation can be felt in the unique sense of fulfillment.
I'm often disappointed to see that in innovation centers like Silicon Valley, I see a lot of really, really smart people doing relatively mundane stuff that actually doesn't really create much impact. I think where the most exciting stuff is going to happen in terms of innovation and where we need a lot of it is actually at the interface between energy, water, and food.
That's right.
That's where I think human mankind is most helped by having step change innovations, rather than developing the next ride-hailing app. I wish some of these data scientists came to realize that the real exciting stuff is happening in energy and food and water. That's where we need your help.
So I think just as a corollary to that, what are the barriers to innovation that all of you face? Because you are in an unenviable position of trying to drive change in each of your organizations, not just trying to keep up, but really trying to stay ahead as well. So what would be those barriers that you would be foreseeing or would be encountering yourself?
So one of the biggest barriers I've seen is, again, although we all say that we are in technology business, we are in finance business, actually all of us are more people in people's business, okay? So in innovation is about people, and one of the biggest barriers, and I've seen success with that, is to deal with fear of failure, okay? So if you can get that cultural change, okay, and have a culture which is okay to fail as, and you learn from the failure and move forward, that means quick to try, quick to fail, and get that incorporated, Because in large corporations, getting that in is one of the most difficult challenges to go beyond. Everything else you can work around, but if I have to put one thing, that is the one thing.
Yeah, for Unilever Foundry, we often say it's all about partnering innovation with insight. I think we can often get caught in the space of going off and running and chasing technologies and the hype curve, blockchain and AI, AR, let's go and do that, And I think reality is it really needs to be tied into what are the business objectives, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and what is it that we can solve. And maybe AI is the solution, but also equally maybe something else is as well. So for us, it's always that conversation around how do you pair innovation with the insight that we have from our business. We touch 2 billion consumers every day. We're the world's second largest advertiser. There's a lot of insight that we can garner there, and how do we make sure that we're pairing that with the types of innovation that we're going after and the objectives that we have.
Any other barriers? No.
I couldn't hear your question from here. So
yeah, sorry, the sound is a bit off, so apologies for that, because I'm getting a few difficulties hearing all of you as well. So I was just checking in whether you face any barriers towards innovation in the places that you're working in. But if
I agree with Sanjeev. I think it is culture, and culture of experimentation and the willingness to try something new. And we have an expression: when something goes forward, you buy a round of beer, and when something gets shut down, you buy a round of champagne. You have to encourage people to take risks, measured risks, little bets. Little bets is the way we like to put it.
Right. So I think this whole risk-taking that you brought about, Sanjeev, is it really rewarded in organizations such as yours? And not pinpointing at anyone here, but I've worked in places where, of course, it's there in your ethics, it's there in your board members' KPIs, but really it's not driven from the top down. And again, it brings us back to leadership. How much of what we're talking about is actually translatable in the lives that we'll lead in the next 1 hour or so?
Well, I think what is important there is two things. First of all, also going back to your barriers, there's two barriers I observe a lot. One is the people that run our operations, are not the most entrepreneurial people, but they're operational excellence people, right? And so they are not incentivized to take risk, because they are about run and maintain and generating the cash that we need to invest in new businesses. So you cannot expect them to embrace every new piece of technology or new business model. So it takes time and it takes effort. And small pilots, you try and find champions in your organization that will embrace the change. And then you try it there, you prove the concept, and then you market the hell out of it inside the organization, so other people want to latch on and be part of the success. And the other piece in terms of barriers that I see a lot is the not invented here syndrome. I mean, at Shell we have thousands of engineers and PhDs, and obviously they always think when a startup calls us, they can do it better. And so a way to accommodate that actually is now before we launch yet another internal research and development project, we actually first look outside in terms of who's solving this problem already. And I know that kind of sounds intuitive and simple to most people, but actually, try that with an R&D organization that believes they can do it better, right? So first go outside, find those startups or other corporates that have done this before, or universities, and then maybe forge partnerships and relationships where you jointly try and solve the problem.
I'm very mindful that we're running out of time, so just one quick round the circle. We've talked about the barriers to innovation, but what is the lubricant for innovation? And if we can start maybe from Zia.
Passionate people who want to make a difference.
Yeah, just starting, I think, get that ball rolling, launch, learn, iterate, don't wait to start.
It goes back to leadership and culture to me.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best things I've seen is, for talented people, legacy matters. So what Zia talked about is about legacy. You challenge people with that what you do as a legacy you leave behind works beautifully.
I couldn't hear your question.
On that note, I think the key takeaway for me is that I came in with a very negative mindset about corporate innovation. I think all of you are fighting the good fight. Be agile, be up to speed with what your competitors are doing, and especially what the startups are doing. And also that agility is really, it should be in your KPI. So is risk-taking, as what Sanjeev said. So on that note, thank you very much to my panelists.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.